Hi everyone, Justin J here from Booksofallshades, and today I had the pleasure of reviewing a book from 𝗏𝗏 𝐻𝐵 known as Death's Kiss. This story was considerably unique in its own right, mostly because the title kind of speaks for itself. You know, Death's Kiss. It's obvious that someone's going to die at the sight of love, or at the smallest display of romantic attraction. The story reels you in pretty quickly. 𝗏𝗏 does a really great job of establishing conflict within the first 5 pages, and if not earlier. Because even though you can tell there's a relationship between 𝗠𝐼, her boyfriend, you can tell that there's a little bit of tension between the two, and I'll show you just which lines she showed this in. It wasn't necessarily perfect because there were a few things that were trying too hard to push it in my face, but it was balanced out pretty well eventually by telling me exactly what happened between the two. Starting at the words, "Well, I hold grudges and I don't forget." There were a few things that were juxtaposed against one another. I feel like the narration often became entangled with the main character's desire to display the story to us, the reader. And sometimes I feel like there were many thoughts and there were many parts of her dialogue that were specifically meant to give us exactly where her whereabouts were, but it was done very abruptly and very quickly. For example, and this is a small spoiler, but there's a part where she's kidnapped, and immediately in italics, it's representing her thoughts. So she's saying things like, "Where am I? Where have I been? How long have I been here?" And these are normally the things that characters say to one another when they're lost, or I should say to the viewer. Normally, in any story, the hero, or the main protagonist, is the one who has to leave their homeland, the place they call their comfort zone, and they're in charge of moving to somewhere that is foreign, somewhere that you could call the outside of their comfort zone. In this case, this is where the story begins, because once the conflict is established, the character is now put in a position where they have to change or adjust to these said things. There are several ways to do this, but akin to my tastes, I'm not really the type of person that enjoys these kinds of things. There are a lot of anime shows and there are a lot of things in the creative mediums that sort of had the characters saying things like, "Where am I?" or "How did I get here?" immediately. And yes, those are the thoughts that we have, but at this point, we can consider these motives to illustrate this confusion to the reader or the viewer as a cliché. A cliché is typically when something occurs over and over again, but not necessarily to say it's repetition within the story itself. It's just a literary device that may have been used too many times. For example, how many times have you heard the old saying, and there's the fact that I said old saying, but how many times have you heard the phrase, "nothing new under the sun"? We've all heard it, and we've heard it to such a point where you can say nothing new, and someone could probably fill in the blank at that point. At this point in time, everyone has access to watching these creative mediums, be it on Netflix, Hulu, Crunchyroll. You can really go anywhere to experience these stories, and the thing is, the more access we have to stories, the more accessible these phrases become. Because as I always say, what we write and what we create is often coming from the influences that are strung outwards from the outside. That being said, these thoughts and these methods to portray this confusion have been used quite many times, and me as the reader or me as the viewer, whatever way you want to see it, I've seen this so many times that when I look at it, I think, okay, well, it's, the character's obviously confused, but I'm sure at this point we all quite know that. This sort of writing continued throughout the novel, and I did pick up on these things every now and then. But the story made me a lot more forgiving because it is very unique. Dialogue, for example, carried about very uniquely as the characters, I could literally tell that they were all different people. I didn't have to struggle or try to figure out who was talking to who. And the group of antagonists, they had a very sadistic touch to them. There wasn't a moment in time where I thought they were just evil for evil's sake. It's all really just an experiment gone wrong. World building in regards to the Joker Institute was very well done. There wasn't a moment where I felt like I was confused about where I was, because it was always done in the beginning of the chapter and even in the intro of the story, which is exactly how the tone was set. I did get a sense of the environment always taking place in the dark, if not in the white room, but it was fitting. It was very fitting to suit the book cover and also the story itself, as it is very dark, but there are many elements of romance laced between. I do remember one part that made me feel like I was editing a document rather than actually reading a book. There was a part where Yuri was receiving a backstory that I'm not going to tell you, obviously you'll have to read it to find out, but there's a part where she reacts to what someone or some people are telling her. Now, normally a way that people would respond in disbelief is by saying hold the phone or something like hold on a second or perhaps rewind, but the character replies with backspace. And I had to take a double take at that point because I was thinking, is this a computer simulation? I wasn't really sure what to think at that point. I brushed it off, but it was a weird addition. But there was always a good sense of desperation in this story, and that's what carries it about very uniquely. Most of the times when I had listened to this story, it was in the dark, or at least at nighttime. So it was very fitting to wonder what was going to happen to Yuri and the rest of the characters in this cast, as they were inevitably, due to their emotions, would be sentenced to death. I have to give this story 4 out of 5 stars. Great job to you, Reggie, for putting so much effort into this story, and I look forward to seeing what else that you put out to the indie author community. Before you leave this video, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with more of our weekly updates. If you'd like to learn more about this author and her story, be sure to click the link in the description below to access her Goodreads page as well as her Amazon.